So before we begin, a quick walkthrough of our final work. This is supposed to be a personal finance dashboard to help us track our actual income, expenses, and net position against these budget numbers. So for income, we budgeted to raise 120,000 for the year. We fell short and we got only 100,000, and that is why this is in red. We're able to reduce our expenses. So instead of 110, we spent 93. That is why it's in green. And our net position fell short of the budget target of 9,000. Now these colors are dynamic. So as an example, if I choose only January, you notice that in January we exceeded the target of 10,000, but we overspent and we were not able to meet our target. Right. So we could do this month on month to see how we fare. Again, beyond just these high numbers, you are also able to see at a high level the breakdown of your income lines and your expense lines. This has been specially designed to plot the income lines to the right and the expense lines to the left. Okay, you can just filter only the expense lines, filter only the income lines, or see both together. This visual also gives us the trend of our actual and budget. Right, so over here, you see that we have our actual numbers. These represent our net position for the year. So you see the yellow line with a shade representing actual, and then the budgets go through like that. Again, we could also go into specific categories, okay, to see how we're faring. So example, for income, we're supposed to get 10,000 throughout, but our actual fell mainly below 10,000. Okay, so it's just a very simple Power BI report, but there's a lot of learning here. We are going to start with just two tables. So two tables containing our transactions, dates, description, the category of income or expense, and the amount. Then our budget table is a simple layout that has our category, our class, the type. These are to help us break down at these different levels, and it's been laid out to have our 12 months spread from January to December for each line. So as an example, if you take only salary, you can now put in how much you expect to earn every month. Then the data in this budget is going to be compared with the actual income or expense on this side of the table. So in the end, this is a summary of what we want to achieve. We are going to use Power Query to transform the tables. We'll connect using the data model, create our DAX calculations, and then we'll end up creating this report that you see here. We'll learn how to use all these tools and format it appropriately. So if you're game, we've shared the start file with you. You can come along step by step, and let's get this done together. Okay, so we'll begin in Power BI Desktop with this blank report. We first have to get the data, right? So I'll go to get data. Because this is from an Excel workbook, I'll use Excel workbook. So my file is stored here. I'm going to double click and open it. So when I do this, it's going to take me to Power Query, which is where I transform and then shape my tables to make it easier for me to analyze my data. Now, before we proceed, you need to pay attention to the 4 icons that you have here. Now, the icons that you have with blue bars are tables. So if you look at the original workbook, there are 2 worksheets named actual and budget. Inside each worksheet are the tables, right? So the table name shows here as actual. So there's an actual table in an actual worksheet, and then there's also a budget table, okay, in a budget worksheet. Right, so I'm showing you this so that you are able to appreciate the difference between the icons. So the ones with the blue bars are the tables, the ones without the blue bars are the worksheets. Okay, so knowing this, we just need the actual tables. So I'll commit actual 1 and then budget 2. Okay, these are the names with suffixes. We can delete them after. Now that I've committed these 2 tables, I am going to transform the data. So I'll click on transform data. So now this brings me to Power Query. So I need to now transform the data, make changes that would make my work easier. First thing is to check the data type, right? So you notice that there are some steps that have been created already. I need to check that the dates here are formatted as dates, texts for the description, text for category, and amount. So far as this is concerned, the content here is fine. I will go and then take off the surface to make this actual. Then let's come to the budget. Now, if you look at the budget table, we have categories in one column, class in another, and then the type, which is income or expense, also in another column. But so far as this layout is concerned, even though it is good for data entry, it will not be good for us to have our 12 months spread across as columns. Ideally, we should have the table in an orientation where all the months are in one column, or all the dates are in one column. Then we have our budgeted numbers also in another column. Okay, so that is going to lead us to the first transformation, where we'll basically collapse the 12 months that has the dates into a single column. To do that, we use a process called unpivoting. So I'm going to highlight category, hold the shift key, right arrow, select class, select type. These three are okay. So I want to unpivot the remaining 12 columns, which basically will collapse the columns or convert them into rows. So I'll right click any of the selected columns, and you see the option to unpivot other columns. So I'll choose unpivot other columns, which basically will bring all my dates into one column, name it attribute, and then the budgeted values also in another column. Right. Now, you will notice that we need these as dates. Okay. So instead of committing this as a text data type, we are going to convert this to a date. Okay. Now, if you convert to a date before you convert it into a date, so I'm going to the step before, you realize that I only had January 24, February 24. It didn't translate this well. So what it did was that it treated the year, which is 2024, as day, so far as my settings are concerned, right? So instead of January 1st, we ended up with 24th January. So we can fix this. So I'm going to take off this step and put in a prefix, okay, so that every date here, so far as the budgeting is concerned, starts on the 1st, right? So before we assign the date type, I'll come to attribute, go to transform, okay, then in format, I'm going to add a prefix here. So I'm going to add this prefix, which is 1 dash to all the dates there, and I'll click OK. So in this case, I have a full date before I proceed and make this a date data type. Okay. So at this point, you can change the name from attribute to date, and then we'll leave this as value for now. Okay. So this will be the major transformation for our budget table. Let's take off the surface. So we have our actual and then we have our budget. Now, if you look at the final work, we are basically going to be breaking down with two things. First, the months here, January to December, right? And then we'll also break down with the categories. Ideally, when you are breaking down, you should have the elements you are breaking down with, in this case, the months and then the category labels, setting as unique dimension tables. Okay. So what we are going to do is the category list that we have here is duplicated. We just want a unique list of all the categories with the corresponding class and type as a separate table. That way, the table can be used as a slicer and it will make our analysis a bit more easier. So I'm going to draw that category, class, type, unique table from this transformed budget query. So I'm going to right click this and I'm going to reference. Referencing means that it will create a copy and still maintain a link to the source. So my goal is just to get the category, class, and type columns. So I'm going to select these three, right click and remove all other columns. Okay, so this will help me focus on just these 3 columns. Now you notice that the duplicates are here. So while these columns are selected, I'll right click and remove duplicates. Okay, so this is now going to give me unique records for each category, its class, and the type. Okay, this is going to be used as a dimension table. So I'm going to name this categories. Now that I'm done with categories, we have to now use the data that we have here to set out which lines are income lines and which ones are expenses. You notice that when we're recording this, we're recording both income and expenses as absolute values. So technically, apart from using the category labels, okay, it will be good to negate all the expenses and then let the income lines be positive, okay, so that it helps in our calculation. But before we do that, we need to know what type each category is, whether it's an income or an expense. So we are going to do something like a lookup that is going to bring what type it is. Remember, from this category table, if I give you the category, you should be able to look up the type from this column. Okay, so example, school is an expense, investment is income, right? We want to look up and then bring that column inside here. To do that in Power Query, we are going to do a merge. So merging on this current table will help us look up and bring that corresponding column. So standing in the actual query, I'm going to home, and then you see in the combined group merge queries. Okay, I'm choosing the first option, merge queries. I want the merging to happen on this existing table, so I'll choose merge queries. The original table I started with is up here as actual, and then I have my categories down here as my second table. So typically, as we are doing a lookup, I need to first select the matching columns. So category here, category there. Okay, so this would ensure that I have all the unique categories matching from the first table. So you notice that from all the 297 entries in the actual table, I have a lookup in the category table. Now, the join kind we are using is the left outer, where it brings all from the first that matches from the second. So ensure that you have this before you proceed. Now that we have the 2 columns matched, we'll go ahead and click OK. So what it's basically going to do is bring the entire categories table, okay, and merge it with the actual table. If you see this icon, it means that you can expand to access more than one column, right? But what we are interested in is just the type column that shows us whether it's income or expense. We also uncheck the use original column name as prefix, and then we proceed and then click OK. So basically we now have our type showing whether it's income or expense for each of the lines. Now, based on this, what we are going to do is we want to negate all the expenses, okay, and then make the income lines positive with a custom formula. It's just a simple logical statement. So we'll go to add column, and then we'll create a custom column. Now, that custom column is going to say that if the type is expense, then negate the amount column, otherwise return the original value. So to do that, we'll do if square bracket, the type that you have here is equal to expense, then square bracket, take the amount that exists in this table and then multiply it by -1. Okay, so multiplication is an asterisk, -1 is here, else, so this is M code, so pay attention to the case and the syntax as well. So else, what we want, square brackets, is the original amount. So if, ensure that you are typing this in lowercase for the generic syntax. So if type is equal to expense in quotes, then take amount and multiply it by -1, else bring the original amount. So this is the M code that we have. I'll click OK. and you notice that it creates a mirror of the original amount, but this time round it negates the expenses and then maintains the income lines as positive. So now that we have this, we are not going to use this original column anymore. We are going to delete it, and along with it we are also going to delete the type. It served this purpose. It helped us create this updated column. So we highlight these two, right click, and remove the columns in there. We are now going to name this amount, and then we'll change the data type to a whole number, right? So that is to help us get the expense lines and the income lines. Because we are going to match this with budget, it's important we do the same adjusted numbers for the budget as well, for the income and expense lines. So we'll come to budget. Thankfully, we already have the type column here. So we are basically going to repeat that custom column and then create the updated numbers as a new column. So I'll come to add column, custom column. So we are repeating the same formula, that if I'm in this table and type here is equal to expense, then we multiply. You notice that this time round the name of the value column is value, okay, not amount. So we'll take value, multiply it by -1, else we return value. Later we'll change this to amount. So this is what we have. Okay, ensure that there are no errors in here, and then we click OK. So again, we get the updated values, which is going to match our actual transactions. So I'll take this and then remove the original one, and then name this amount as well. Okay, ensure that you change the data type to a whole number to match the content in there. So we now have our actual looking similar to our budget in terms of orientation and the values that we are going to compare: negative for expenses, positive for income lines, same for both queries. So before we exit, I mentioned that we are breaking down with categories, which already is here as a dimension table, and the month names. Now for the month names, because we have two queries with different dates, it will be good to create one query that harmonizes or puts together the dates in the actual and also the dates in the budget. Okay, so that we have one central calendar table that will track the beginning and end for these two tables with every date present. So because of that, we are going to create a new query. So I'll come here, right click in the gray space, new query, blank query. Okay, we are going to use a custom code for this. So we start number.from. So number.from basically is going to grab a value for us, okay, which is a date. Now that date is going to be the minimum or the earliest date. Okay, so we have list.min. List.min will grab the earliest dates from the budget table, because we budget first before we start the transactions, right? So after the open bracket, I'll go to budget, square bracket, and here I'm going to put in the dates for the budget table. Okay, so I'll close bracket for list.min, close bracket for number.from. What it's basically going to do is it's going to stamp the earliest date that we budgeted. Okay, so I'm going to copy this, bring two dots, because we are going to create a sequence of dates. Okay, and then paste the same thing I copied here. Now the timeline we want is going to start from the minimum date to the latest date. So far as this data is concerned, the latest date is expected to come from the actual table, because all the dates in the budget starts on the 1st. Okay, so this is going to be our actual table and then dates in here. So we'll grab the minimum date, put in series of dates all the way to the latest date in the actual table. You can make adjustments if your case is different. Okay, so I'll stand right after the equal sign, bring in a curly bracket, and then close with another curly bracket because we want to generate a list. Okay, so let me go through number.from, list.min, budget date, two dots number.from, list.max, actual date. So let's press enter and see what we get. Now, initially you get these generic values representing dates. It's a list, so we are going to convert it into a table. So you click convert to table on the left, click OK, and then this now gives you your dates. If you convert this from this ABC123 to a date, you notice that it actually starts from the 1st of January 2024. No date is missed here all the way to the latest date you have in the transaction. Okay, now we can name this date. Okay, and then proceed to draw the date attributes that will be relevant for our analysis. So I'm going to click on the date column, go to add column. First, if you're going to do this for multiple years, you can draw the year attribute for each date. Okay, repeat the process. I'll come to date. This time around, I want the month values. We'll use this later to sort the dates, the months, and then lastly, I want to draw the month names, the actual month names. So this is going to be name of month. So I have dates, year, month, month name. Because this is going to be used in the charts, it will be easier for us to abbreviate, okay, or truncate. So I'm going to stand in here, go to transform, and extract just the first 3 characters. So I'll do this and then click OK. Okay, so I have date, year, month, month name. This is my full calendar table. So I'll come and then name this calendar. Right. So in the end, we are going to break down our actual and budget calculations with categories and calendar, which we have drawn as dimension tables. These two are going to be our fact tables because we calculate from there. It contains our main transactions. So now that we are done, we can now exit Power Query. I'll come to Home and then choose Close and Apply. So it's going to load the queries into the data model, and we'll go to the data model to connect our tables. So when you are done, you notice that you have your 4 tables right here. Okay, so now that our tables have loaded, we now need to connect these tables in the data model of Power BI. And this is the third icon. Okay, so I'm going to click in the model view. So this brings me here. You see some panes to the right. You can fold these. Okay, and you see your 4 tables, your 2-dimension tables, categories and calendar here, and your budgets and actual also here. Okay, so basically some of the tables are connected already, but to help you understand what is going on, I'm going to delete all the connected lines and then we start from scratch. Okay, so the main thing here is to know your fact tables, the tables you're going to calculate from, the tables that contain the transactions, and in this case is actual and the budget tables. When we calculate from these 2 tables, our slicers or our filters will come from categories and the calendar, right? So these are going to help us break down or slice our calculations. So between categories and actual, there should be a common column to connect the 2 tables. In this case, it's category. We have a unique list of categories here, going into many entries for category in the transactions table or the actual table. So once you've identified these common columns, we just basically connect them. Okay, so you can take it from any direction. I take category, click and hold it, and then drag it onto the other category here. So I get a detailed view of what I'm connecting. So on top is my dimension table, which has 1 of category, going into another version of category that has many. So this is a 1-to-many relationship, right? So once it's there, once you've confirmed, you can now go ahead, save, and then these 2 tables can now talk to each other, right? We are going to repeat the same thing. So category going into budget. Again, the common column here is category in here, going into the categories version in the budget. So again, this is a 1-to-many. We confirm that and then we'll save. Okay, so again, this is connected. So what it means is that any calculations we do from these 2 tables, we can use the fields or columns here to break it down. Same for calendar. We have date here. So date here has all the dates in both tables. So I'm going to take this date, drag it onto the date that we have here. Okay. I'll make this active and then click on save. And then I'll repeat same for calendar to budget. So I'll take this and then connect it to this date here. And then again, I'll click on save. Okay. So this now becomes my full data model. So at this point, you could also take a look at the tables that you have here in the table view. So I have my actual, my budget, my calendar table. Ideally, we should mark this calendar table as a date table. So I'm going to do that and then just switch it on as a date table. I need to commit the column that contains dates. So I'll choose this. It validates it successfully and then I'll click save. This way, Power BI recognizes this table as the table to break down all my calculations by date. Okay, and then my fourth table is also here. Right. So we are back to the report view. Now, we have one model that has all our 4 tables. We are going to start our calculations. We call them measures. Our 4 tables are here: actual, budget, calendar, and categories. Ideally, we should also have a container of all the calculations. It makes it easier for your user. So we are going to create a special table that will house all our calculations. To do that, we'll go to modeling. Okay. So in Power BI, we can create measures, we can create new columns, we can also create new tables with DAX calculations. So I'm going to launch this new table. Okay. This would open up the formula bar. When the formula bar opens up, we basically would override the highlighted area with a square bracket, bring a space, okay, and then type in measures. The reason we are doing this is we want the table to be called measures. Space here is to ensure that measures is a generic name, so we cannot really use the name as it is. So the space here is just to create a modified version so that it doesn't conflict with what already exists in Power BI. So right after here, you bring your cursor after the closing square bracket, you put it an equal to, okay, and then you press enter. So this is going to create an empty table on top of your 4 tables. So we are going to launch all our measures from here. So now that we have this, we are now going to create our 2 main measures. The first one is to sum all our transactions from the actual table. So this is the column that contains income and expense. If we sum this, we are basically going to get the net position, or how much was left at the end of the year when we subtract expense from income. So we'll do the subtraction on the actual table and also on the budget table. Then later we'll go ahead and create the income expense from these 2 tables, and then we'll use that in our final visual. So let's do that. To create the first measure, you right click on the table you just created, you go to new measure, it opens up your formula bar. So let's call this actual, that's the name of the measure, bring in an equal sign. So it's going to be a simple sum of the actual table, the amount column in there, and then you close your final bracket. Okay, so this is what we have. I'm going to press enter. So you see that it registers the first measure inside the measures table. There's an idle column here. If you like, you can hide it. You can click on the ellipsis and then hide it. So you only see the measures that you are creating. I'll right click again, go to new measure, and then do the same calculation for budget. So in budget, we'll go to the budget table and then sum the net position for our budget. So when I do that, I also have this calculation for actual and budget. Now, from these 2, we want to know the income, and then we also want to know the expense from these 2 calculations. To help us do that, if you look at the orientation of the table, what we did was that we negated all the expenses, okay, and then we made the income lines positive. So if I throw in a criteria that says that from the calculation you did here, which is the sum of the amount, filter only the amounts that are less than 0, which we'll use as expense, and then the ones that are greater than 0 we'll use as income. Okay, so let's go and filter what we have just calculated to give us the income and then expense lines. So I'll come back to my report view and then create the actual income measure. So I'll go to new measure. Let's call this actual income. We introduce a DAX function called calculate. Okay, basically what calculate does is that you give it an expression. This expression is any calculation you've done already, or you can directly put in that calculation. Right, we have actual, which is a sum of both the expense and the income. We want to filter this calculation with a criteria. So I'll put in actual, bring a comma. So we are basically saying that in the actual table, when you go into the actual table, anything that is greater than 0, okay, is going to be classified as actual income. Right, so this is the filter that I'm throwing in. I'll close my final bracket. We are going to use the syntax for the rest of the calculation, so I'm going to copy it. Okay, so this is the formula. I'll go ahead and then press enter. So this gives us actual income. While these measures are popping up, it will be good to see the actual values behind them. Okay, now if you draw this here, what is going to happen is that it's going to give you the actual income that you just calculated, which is 100,000. That's all the income that came in during the year. Okay, so by drawing this here, Power BI basically is using the card visual, which is the default, to display the value that you just created. Okay, so we are going to use this method to see all the calculations that we need in the final report. So let's proceed with actual expense, right? So you know the flow already. I'll come here, new measure. Okay, let's paste what we just put in here. Instead of actual income, we are going to call this actual expense. So again, the sum of actual, this time around, we want things less than 0. Okay, so that will give us our actual expense. Then we press enter. So again, let's see what this gives us. So I'm going to draw, click and hold this, and then drag it into the canvas. So this gives us minus 93,000. Okay, that's how much we spent. So based on this, if we subtract actual income and actual expense, we should now get our net position for actual. We already have these two measures here, right? So it's going to be a subtraction, but we need to take note of the sign of the actual expense, which is negative. So instead of subtracting, we'll put in a plus to give us the net position. So I'm going to right click, new measure, and then we'll name this actual net. These two measures, the ones we've calculated already, actual income is here, and I'll hit the plus sign and then call actual expense. Okay, so this is going to give us our net position for actual. Let's see if it agrees with what we have. So it will be good to format these with a comma as they come in. Later we'll need it in the final visual. So I'll take actual and then drag it here. So this will give us 7,000, right? 100,000 minus 93,000. That's what we have here. Okay, so after calculating these three, we need to compare the budget numbers for the same indicators. So budget income, budget expense, budget net. Okay, we are going to use the same method. So what we are going to do is we'll start a new measure, okay, and then use the same process. So this we are going to call budget income. Okay, so just as we use calculate to break down or filter this expression, which is the sum of all the in and outs in the budget table. Okay, we want to say that in the budget table, if the amount is greater than 0, okay, then we call that our budget income. So this is what we are going to use for the budget expense. I'm going to copy this, okay, and I'm going to press enter. So budget income is what we have. I'm going to format this. So now we are basically dragging and dropping, right? So what is going to happen is I'm going to intentionally drag the budget income into the same card that we have for actual income, right? So let's see what this gives us. So when I do that, it converts the single card visual into what we call a multi-row card, where you can see two numbers side by side, right? I'm doing this on purpose so that you see how the budgets and income numbers compare. Okay, so we have actual income and budget income. So later we'll convert this into a KPI visual and then we'll move from there. So let's now do same for the expense. So again, I'll come here, new measure, paste what we just did, make some changes. So this is going to be expense. Budget is still our measure, but this time round, if it's less than 0, okay, we call it expense. So I'll press enter, and for this, the counterpart is actual expense. So I'll take this and then drag it inside the same card. So again, we get to compare our actual expense and budget expense. Okay, so that should be for our expenses together. And then finally, our net position. So I'll right click, new measure. Let's call this budget net, which should now be equal to our budget income plus our budget expense. So I'm going to press enter for this. So it registers here. Now let's see what this gives us. So I'm going to drag this into our actual net, and here we are comparing actual net and budget net in a multi-row card. Okay, so this is our third visual side by side. Okay, so now that we have this, we are almost done covering our key indicators. Okay, so we now have to start building the visual. We are now going to convert this multi-row card, okay, into a KPI card, right? What is good about the KPI card is that you are able to compare an actual value against a target, right? So while this is selected, I'm going to click on this KPI card with the green and red icons. So this is what it gives me. Now, it initially gives us a blank for a reason. When you have any visual and then you go into the icon to add the data, okay, there are some compulsory inputs. So you have your actual income as the value, which you are comparing to the target budget income, but you need a timeline. This trend axis has to be filled in, right? So we are going to put in year for this. So I'll click add data, come to the calendar table, and then we'll drop year. Okay, we have only 1 year, so it's not going to show anything here. You could do months as well, but for our purpose, we want the generic timeline to be here. So what you basically see here is the 100,000, which is our income. Then the goal here is 120,000, which was our budgeted income, right? So we are going to repeat the same thing for our expenses. So I'll select this, come here, and then change this to a KPI card. In the trend axis, I'm going to add year. Okay, so again, this gives us the comparison, and then I'll come here and then do same. So I'll convert this into a KPI card, introduce the calendar year, and then we basically have this. Okay, so these are going to be our three headline visuals. Okay, then once we have this, we want to compare actual and budget trends in terms of the net position by month, right? So we are going to use the line chart for this purpose. So I'm going to insert a blank placeholder line chart for the visual. Okay, so this is what we have. For our x-axis, we are going to use the month names. So I'll come to calendar and then put in the month names. Okay. Then for our y-axis, we have our two measures. First one is actual, and then the second one is going to be the budget. Okay. So we have something like this. Now, if you pay close attention, you realize that the months are not sorted properly, right? So we need to use the month value column, which we created in the calendar table, to sort this properly, right? So basically all we need to do is ensure we have the data icon displayed. We go to calendar, right? The issue is with month name. So I'm going to select month name. And then when you select it in the column tools, you see the option to sort by column, right? So we need this to be sorted chronologically. January comes first and December is the last month. And that is why we are going to use month, because this contains 1 to 12 mapped to the beginning of the year all the way to the end of the year. So for our 1 to 12, we'll choose this one. Immediately, you're not going to see the effect. So normally what you do is that you come to the month name in the x-axis, use the arrow, and then select this again. Okay, so you notice that this is now properly sorted from January to December. Okay, so we are almost there. The last thing that we need to do is to put in the bar chart we have here that plots the income to the right and the expenses to the left. And that's why we maintain the signs, okay, to give us this visual. So again, I'm going to proceed and then insert a clustered bar chart. Okay, so this is going to be the placeholder for the visual. So my y-axis in this case is going to be the categories from the category table. So I'll come to categories and then choose categories. Okay, then my x-axis is going to be the actual calculation that I did here. So I'm going to click on this. So this gives me the actual for each category, right? So before we proceed, it's important we start formatting the report to match the theme that we've chosen. Okay, so this is a dark mode with gold. Okay, so we are going to bring in the theme first so that we can now set the yellow and then gray matches. Okay, so let's bring in the theme. Now, the main element in this design is a PowerPoint background. So this is the PowerPoint background. It has been shared with you in the files for practice. So we've saved this as an image, JPEG. We are going to bring it in as a background. Okay, so you need to right click on any empty space in the canvas. Then you click on Format Canvas. This will bring the canvas background option under Format. In the image section, you have the option to browse for the image you have saved from the PowerPoint. So I'll click on Browse. This is the image that I saved from the PowerPoint file. Right, so I'm going to double click and so I'm going to open it. You will not see anything because in the canvas background settings, the transparency is set to 100%. So I'm going to reduce this to 0. Okay, so this brings the dark background, and then you have to set the image fit, which is set to normal to fit. Okay, so this way you see everything displayed in the canvas. Now, you need to ensure that these cards or visuals you have here have a transparent background to make your work easier. One theme that you can use in Power BI that already has transparent backgrounds for most of the visuals is the classic view. So at this stage, what you need to do is go and choose a theme that will make your visuals transparent or your cards transparent. So I'll come to view. These are the themes, right? So if you drop this down, the one that I'm interested in is this classic view. Okay, so I'm going to choose this classic view. So once you choose that, you will notice your dark mode now comes alive. So you can now see clearly the background, and then the charts are also, and the cards are also transparent. So your job now is to align each visual, okay, in the backdrop that aligns with it in the PowerPoint, right? So this chart goes in here. I'm going to align this income, align this expense, right? And then also align this net position. Okay. In each case, ensure that you can use the red lines as markers. So let's first set the income line. Okay. And then we come here. So as long as the red lines come in, it means it's aligned, bottom and top. Okay. And then we can now stretch this a bit. Remember, this already came with our income and expense legend. Okay. So when we format this, we'll take this into consideration. Now, let's take each card and then format it one by one. So for this, we are going to use this icon. Okay. So you have some options here to remove title. Okay. Then we'll go to more options, right, to explore what we have. In the more options, it opens up this right pane. So for starters, the target label, which is the budget label, that's the goal. Let's start with that. So I'm going to open this. You realize that because this is a dark mode design, we need to invert all the dark colors to white. So the font color for this is going to be white. And I'm going to increase the font to 12. Okay, so we now have our actual against our budget. The label for budget is by default goal. To make it a bit more realistic, let's change the goal to budget. Okay, so this is going to come below our actual values. Now, it's important you understand how the colors work. So if we didn't meet budget, and if it's an income line, okay, it shows red. You can change the colors in the trend axis. Okay, so high is good for income lines. Okay, if we exceeded budget, this should have been green, but we haven't. Okay, so if you like, you can change the bad color and make it a softer red. Okay, so you could also do that. Now, to make our job easier, it looks like the logic for income, expense, and nets will all be the same. Because for expense, even though low is good, we are using negative numbers. In essence, the negative numbers here will make it align with what we have. Okay, so in this case where we are comparing 93 to 110, because we underspent, right, we are seeing a green line here. Okay, so to make our job easier, I'll select what we've done already on this card, go to home, use this format painter, click on it, and then touch this one. Okay, so we just apply the format to this. We can take this format painter again and then apply the format to this. Right, so this now gives us our 3 headline indicators formatted to show us our budget and actual. Later, when we bring our slices in, you see how the colors change. Now, for our actual and budget trend, these are the net positions. So I'm going to select the charts, go into the format icon, take off the title to make room, and then we'll go to more options. First, we'll focus on the lines, right? So this green line is supposed to be the actual line. So we'll come to the lines. When you come to the lines, you have the default selection as all. In the series, you have to choose which one you want to format. So I'm going to choose actual. Okay. Then come down and then set the color for our actual. So our actual here is going to be gold. Okay. So I've set that. And we are going to include a shade area, which is currently turned off. So I'll switch this on. Okay. And then once we have this, you can go back up and change the interpolation type, which is currently linear, and make it smooth. Okay, so that's will give you that effect, right? In the default behavior, the line color matches the shade area, right? So once you choose the line color, the shade area comes along. Let's do same for our budget. So we'll come to budget, and then for budget, we maintain it as solid. The color here is going to be white. Okay. The interpolation type is going to be smooth. And then once we come down, we'll turn on the shade area. It's already turned on. Okay. So this is what we have. Now we just have to lighten up the X and Y axis. So I'll come to the X axis and then make this white. Okay. And then I'll come to the Y axis. In the Y axis, in the value section, currently set to gray, I'll make this white as well. Okay. So this is what we have, right? Easy on the eye, just to give us a sense of how the actual and budget net positions compare month on month. Okay. So let's switch our focus to this clustered bar chart. So once this is selected, our main goal is to put in a conditional format, okay, to color positive numbers yellow and the negative numbers white or gray. So I've selected this. I'll go straight to bars. Okay. Then in the color, you see that it's set to this green color. I'll come to the FX. Okay. This allows me to set the rule for this. So once I come here, I'll choose rules and then set the field I want to use. Remember, we use actual for this, so I'm going to set it to actual. This is the measure that we are going to use. So we are going to say that if the value is greater than 0, in this case we are choosing a number, okay, and it's less than the maximum, so we put in max here. Once you delete the 0, max comes. Okay, so this is also a number. We want this to have the gold color. That is for the income lines. Okay. Then we'll put in a new rule that would bring the negative numbers. The new rule for the negative numbers. So this one, we'll make this min. So you delete the 0 there, it shows min. You change this to number. So if it's greater than the minimum, okay, and it's less than 0 as a number, we want this set to first shade of gray. Okay, so this is the rule we are going to set to color. I'll go ahead and then I'll click OK. Right, so you notice that it applies it as it should. It matches the legend that we brought in. So at this point, we can come and then take off the title to make more room. Okay, and then while we are here, we can take off the grid lines to make it a bit cleaner, and then go and format our Y-axis labels and then choose white for the colors. Okay, so this is now going to give us that display. So in terms of the basic designs, we are done. We need to now bring in the slicers for the months and the type, whether it's income or expense. So I'll select any blank area in the canvas and then insert a slicer here. So for this slicer, the data we are going to use, so I'm going to add, is going to be the categories. Okay, and then we'll choose type. So initially we have our income and expense. We'll choose the format icon, go to more options. Under the slicer settings, we'll choose tile, okay, to make it easier for us to view. So this is going to be for our type. So what it's going to do is that if we just want to zoom into income lines, when we click, it should just shrink and show us the income lines. Okay, no expense. Okay, if we just want the expense, same thing. Okay, so we have something like that. So that is our first slicer. So for our second slicer, we are going to insert for a placeholder for the slicer. The data we are adding here is from the calendar, and we are choosing the month name. Okay, so just as we did in the slicer settings, we are going to choose tile for this display, and then we stretch it all the way to get a 1 row 12 column display, which we can place down here and then stretch it all the way. So we have something like this. Right. If you like, you can change the fill colors for the slicer by coming to values. Okay, there's the option to change the background of the slicer. If you want a deeper gray, you can choose this one, and then also change the font color to white. Okay, so you could use that display as well. Now, the last thing that we need to do is make sure the interaction makes sense. Okay, so example, if I click on February, you notice that it's just showing me 2 dots on this chart, right? Not really insightful. So I'm going to disconnect the interaction between this chart and the slicer here. So to do that, you can go to Format. In the far left, you see Edit Interactions, right? If you have selected this slicer, what this means is the slicer currently is filtering all these visuals that you see, right? If you don't want it to filter this current chart, there are 2 icons here, filter and then no filter, which is none. So you just click on this, okay? Then we go back, take off the edit interactions. So what this means is that if I click, it's the others that are going to respond to the month that I have selected. Okay. So before we go, you can format this properly. So the actual income measure, we need to put a comma in there. So I'll come to measures, select the actual income, and then set this to show a comma, right? So that's at least you are consistent, right? So in the end, this is our final report. I'm sure you've learned a lot, how to use Power Query to merge, how to create a calendar table, how to reference and create a unique dimension table, our measures using DAX, and then the formatting tricks that will help us color income and expenses separately, and then the smooth lines and the shaded areas. So hopefully, if you got this far, you've learned something that can help you. Thank you so much for coming along, and we'll see you in the next video.
If this video was helpful and you would like to receive more of these videos directly on your WhatsApp, you can send ad to this WhatsApp number. We'll add you to our broadcast list so you receive our videos directly. You can also visit our YouTube channel, Finance Skills Hub. All our old videos are here. Please subscribe for notification of new videos, or connect with us on any of these social media handles. Thank you so much for watching.